Life can change in an instant. And for Emma, it happens the moment her flower shop's her lifeline and her late father's dream teeters on the edge of collapse. A single mother juggling her business, her daughter, and the unexpected return of her estranged mother. Emma is no stranger to hardship. But when a winter storm shatters her shop window and dwindling sales threaten her future, Emma is forced to confront the fear of failure head-on. Through this storm, Emma faces more than just financial struggles. Can she find it in her heart to forgive a mother who walked away years ago? Will her community rally behind her when she needs them the most? And how will a broken shop window become the start of something she never expected a chance to rebuild her life, not just her business? The late afternoon sky over the small Illinois town was heavy with clouds. Emma Carter stood behind the counter of her flower shop, Petal Haven, watching the streetlights flicker on as the first drops of rain began to fall. The store had been her sanctuary, a testament to years of hard work and sacrifice. It wasn't much a modest space with worn wooden floors and shelves lined with mason jars of roses, daisies, and lilies, but it was hers. Emma turned back to her task, arranging a bouquet for Mrs. Thompson, a loyal customer who always requested fresh tulips for her dining table. The familiar routine of trimming stems and tying ribbons usually calmed Emma's nerves, but today her mind was elsewhere. She'd been struggling to make ends meet, especially after the rising costs of supplies and utilities had eaten away at her savings. Maybe I should start offering online orders, Emma muttered to herself, though the thought of navigating websites and delivery logistics made her stomach churn. Her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, poked her head out from the back room. "Mom, is it okay if I color for a bit? I'm done with my homework." Emma smiled, the sight of Lily always a balm to her worries. "Of course, sweetheart. Use the markers in the top drawer." Lily grinned and disappeared, her quiet humming soon filling the shop. Emma sighed and adjusted the price tags on a display of sunflowers, ignoring the gnawing fear in the pit of her stomach. Then the wind picked up. The storm rolled in with a vengeance, faster and fiercer than the weather forecast had predicted. By the time Emma locked the front door and pulled the blinds, the rain was pounding against the glass like a relentless drumbeat. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the flickering streetlights finally gave out, leaving the shop bathed in dim shadows. "Lily, grab your jacket," Emma called. "We need to head home before it gets worse." But before they could leave, the windows rattled with a ferocity that stopped Emma in her tracks. The roar of the wind drowned out all other sound, and then, with a deafening crash, the front window shattered. Emma instinctively shielded Lily, pulling her close as glass sprayed across the floor. The gale tore through the shop, toppling shelves and scattering flowers like confetti. Water seeped in from every corner, soaking the wooden floor. "Mom, I'm scared," Lily whimpered, clutching her mother tightly. Emma's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "It's going to be okay. Stay right here while I check the back." Navigating the chaos, Emma managed to shut the back door, which had blown open, and grabbed some towels to block the rain. When she returned to the front of the store, her chest tightened at the sight of the destruction. Flowers lay ruined, their petals crushed and strewn about. Shelves were overturned, and the cash register was soaked. For a moment, Emma stood frozen, overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. How was she going to fix this? The shop had been barely hanging on as it was. Now, with the windows shattered and the inventory ruined, she couldn't see a way forward. "Mom!" Lily's small voice broke through her thoughts. Emma turned, kneeling to hold her daughter close. "It's just stuff, honey. We're okay. That's what matters." But even as she said the words, her mind churned with worry. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Emma and Lily stood outside the shop, staring at the gaping hole where the window used to be. "Is it bad, Mom?" Lily asked, her voice hesitant. Emma forced a smile. "It looks worse than it is." But the lie tasted bitter. Neighbors and shop owners along the street began to emerge, assessing the damage. Mr. Hart from the bakery next door shuffled over, his gray hair disheveled and his apron smudged with flour. "Emma, your shop took a real beating," he said, shaking his head. "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll get it fixed up," he said with a confidence she didn't feel. "If you need help, you let me know." Emma nodded, though the idea of asking for help made her stomach churn. She'd always prided herself on being self-reliant, a trait she'd inherited from her father. After he passed away 5 years ago, it had been just her and Lily, figuring things out on their own. And now this. By the end of the day, Emma had swept up the glass and salvaged what little she could. She called her insurance company, only to hear the dreaded words, "Your policy won't cover the full repair costs." "Great," Emma muttered, slamming the phone down. Her savings were meager, barely enough to cover rent and utilities. That night, after Lily was asleep, Emma sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. The numbers refused to add up, no matter how many times she recalculated. The next morning, Emma forced herself to return to the shop. As she unlocked the door, she noticed something unusual. A bouquet of fresh daisies and a note were sitting on the doorstep. "Emma, you've always brightened our days with your flowers. Now it's our turn to return the favor. We're here for you. Your neighbors." Emma's throat tightened as she read the note. She looked around, noticing other small gestures. Someone had swept the sidewalk in front of the shop, and a roll of plastic sheeting sat neatly by the broken window. The unexpected kindness left Emma both touched and humbled. Later that day, her best friend, Sarah, arrived with a thermos of coffee and a determined look on her face. "We're going to figure this out," Sarah said, setting the thermos down with a thud. "First we clean up, then we brainstorm ways to get the shop back on its feet." "Sarah, I don't even know where to start," Emma admitted, tears welling in her eyes. Sarah placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You start by letting people help you. You've been there for all of us in one way or another. It's okay to lean on us now." Over the next few days, the community rallied around Emma. Volunteers helped board up the window, clean the debris, and even donate supplies. Sarah helped Emma apply for a small business grant to cover repairs, while Mr. Hart brought pastries every morning to keep their energy up. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't just the physical repairs, it was the realization that she wasn't alone. That night, as Emma tucked Lily into bed, her daughter looked up at her with wide, hopeful eyes. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Emma kissed her forehead and smiled. "We're going to be better than okay, sweetheart. We have so many people rooting for us." As she turned off the light and lay in her own bed, Emma thought about the kindness she'd been shown. She had always believed asking for help was a sign of weakness, but now she understood something important. Strength came from accepting help and allowing others to lift you when you couldn't stand on your own. Looking out the window, Emma whispered, "We'll rebuild. One step at a time." Little did she know, the storm wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a journey that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The smell of rain still clung to the air as Emma unlocked the shop the next morning. The boards over the broken window creaked as she pushed the door open, stepping inside to face the wreckage. For a moment, she stood still, taking it all in: the scattered flower petals, the wilted stems, and the overturned displays. Her heart felt as broken as the glass she'd swept into a pile the day before. But today, there was no time to wallow. The grant application Sarah had helped her submit was due by the end of the week, and the paperwork was daunting. Emma set her bag down on the counter, grabbed a broom, and began sweeping away the dirt tracked in by the storm. The rhythmic motion calmed her nerves, her mind starting to settle into a plan. "Mom, can I help?" Lily's voice pulled Emma out of her thoughts. Emma turned to see her daughter standing in the doorway, a determined look on her face. "Of course, sweetheart. Can you start by gathering those ribbons over there?" Lily nodded and got to work, her small hands carefully stacking the ribbons. Watching her, Emma felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't the childhood she'd envisioned for Lily. "I'm sorry you're stuck helping me, Lily," Emma said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Lily looked up, her face bright. "It's okay, Mom. I like helping you, and it'll look so pretty when it's all fixed." Emma smiled, marveling at her daughter's optimism. "You're amazing, you know that?" Lily beamed, and they worked side by side until the shop looked as tidy as it could under the circumstances. Later that afternoon, Sarah arrived with her usual energy, carrying a laptop and a folder stuffed with papers. "Okay, Emma," she said, plopping down at the counter. "We need to finish the grant application. Did you get the financials sorted?" Emma groaned, rubbing her temples. "Not yet. I'll have to go through the receipts tonight." Sarah gave her a pointed look. "You'll get it done, and you'll get that grant. I can feel it." Emma couldn't help but smile at her friend's confidence. "Thanks for believing in me, Sarah." "That's what I'm here for," Sarah replied, opening her laptop. The two women worked late into the evening, poring over numbers and crafting the perfect answers to the application's questions. By the time Sarah left, Emma felt a small spark of hope. The next morning, Emma headed to the community center to submit the application. The space was bustling with people chatting, filling out forms, and exchanging ideas. Emma hesitated at the door, suddenly feeling out of place. She was just a florist, not a savvy businesswoman. What did she know about competing for grants? "Hey, you made it." Emma turned to see a tall man in his 60s smiling at her. He was dressed in khakis and a neatly pressed shirt, with a satchel slung over one shoulder. "I'm Walter," he said, extending a hand. "Emma," she replied, shaking his hand. Walter nodded toward the counter where applications were being collected. "First time applying for a grant? Is it that obvious?" Emma asked, half smiling. "Not at all," Walter said. "I've seen that look of hesitation 100 times. I volunteer here, helping people navigate the process. If you have any questions, let me know." Emma felt a wave of relief. "Thank you. That's kind of you." "It's what I do," Walter said with a shrug. "Lost my wife a few years back. Helping others keeps me busy and sane." Emma found herself opening up, sharing a brief version of her story. Walter listened intently, nodding in understanding. "I know what it's like to feel like the ground's been ripped out from under you," he said. "But you're here, Emma. That means you're fighting." Emma blinked back unexpected tears. "I guess I am." Walter grinned. "Tell you what, if you get that grant, I'll help you redesign your shop. I'm a retired architect. Might be fun to put my skills to use again." Emma stared at him, surprised. "You do that?" "Of course," Walter said, his tone casual. "Kindness has a way of coming back around, doesn't it?" Over the next few days, Emma threw herself into repairing the shop while waiting for news about the grant. Walter stopped by to offer advice, sketching ideas on scraps of paper and bringing her coffee. His presence was comforting, a steady reminder that she wasn't in this alone. One afternoon, as Emma was sorting through damaged inventory, she heard the bell above the door ring. She looked up, expecting Sarah or Walter, but froze when she saw who it was. A woman stood there, her posture stiff and her hands clutching a small purse. She had the same auburn hair as Emma, though streaked with gray, and the same piercing green eyes. "Mom," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hi, Emma," Caroline said, her voice hesitant. "I got your address from Sarah. I hope it's okay that I stopped by." Emma felt her chest tighten. It had been nearly 7 years since her mother had walked out of her life, unable to cope with the grief of losing Emma's father. Seeing her now, so suddenly, was like reopening a wound she thought had healed. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, her tone sharper than she intended. Caroline flinched but held her ground. "I wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry." Emma crossed her arms, unsure how to respond. "Sorry for what?" "Leaving me to figure everything out on my own." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "I know I hurt you, Emma. I was lost after your father died. I didn't know how to be there for you when I couldn't even be there for myself." Emma felt anger bubbling to the surface, but underneath it was something else: confusion, longing, and a glimmer of hope. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Caroline took a deep breath. "Because I realized I've missed so much, and I don't want to miss any more." Before Emma could reply, Lily emerged from the back room, her coloring book in hand. She stopped short, staring at the unfamiliar woman. "Who's that?" Lily asked. Emma hesitated, her heart pounding. "This is your grandmother." Caroline's face lit up with a mixture of joy and sadness. Lily, it's so nice to meet you." Lily looked at her mother, then back at Caroline. "You're my grandma?" "Yes," Caroline said softly. "And I'd really like to get to know you." Emma watched the exchange, her emotions swirling. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive her mother, but for Lily's sake, she couldn't close the door entirely. That evening, Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note Caroline had left with her phone number. "What do I do, Dad?" she whispered, her eyes drifting to the framed photo of her father on the wall. His kind eyes seemed to look back at her, as if urging her to find the strength to move forward. Emma picked up her phone and typed out a text. Mom, let's meet for coffee tomorrow." Her finger hovered over the send button before she took a deep breath and pressed it. As she climbed into bed, Emma thought about the unexpected kindness she'd experienced in the past few days, from Walter's guidance to her neighbor's support to her mother's attempt to reconcile. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but Emma was beginning to believe it might be worth it. The cafe smelled of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon as Emma sat at a corner table, her fingers nervously twisting a napkin. Outside, the morning traffic hummed along, but the bustling sounds barely registered in her ears. She checked her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. Caroline was late. Emma's heart raced as her thoughts spiraled. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe this was a mistake. But before Emma could dwell further, the door jingled open, and there she was. Caroline stepped in, her auburn hair neatly pinned back and her hands clutching a leather purse. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on Emma, and she smiled hesitantly. Emma stood awkwardly as Caroline approached. "Hi," Emma said, her voice tight. Carolina Raplia." They sat, neither quite knowing what to say. Caroline smoothed her skirt, while Emma busied herself with the menu, even though she already knew what she wanted. A waitress appeared, breaking the tension. "Can I get you ladies something?" "Just a coffee, black," Caroline said. "Same for me," Emma added, handing over her menu. Once the waitress was gone, Caroline spoke, her tone careful. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Emma nodded, her hands tightening around her napkin. "I figured it was time we talked." Caroline took a deep breath, her eyes searching Emma's face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't expect it, but I want to explain." Emma's chest tightened, a mix of anger and longing swirling within her. "You left, Mom. After Dad died, you just disappeared. I was 25, trying to hold everything together, and you walked away." "I know," Caroline whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I was a mess, Emma. Losing your father broke me in ways I didn't know how to handle. I thought I was sparing you by leaving." Emma's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Sparing me? You left me with the house, the bills, and a mountain of grief. Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough to make you stay?" Tears streamed down Caroline's face, but she didn't try to wipe them away. "I was selfish," she admitted. "I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was just running. From my pain, from my responsibilities, from you." Emma looked away, blinking back her own tears. The anger she'd clung to for years felt like a wall crumbling brick by brick, leaving her vulnerable and unsure. "Why now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why come back after all this time?" Caroline hesitated, then reached into her purse, pulling out a small, worn photo. She slid it across the table. Emma picked it up and felt a lump form in her throat. It was a picture of her and Lily at a park, taken last spring. "I saw this," Caroline said. "A friend of mine recognized you and sent it to me. When I saw Lily," her voice broke. "Emma, I've already missed so much. I don't want to miss anything else. I want to be there for you, for her, if you'll let me." Emma stared at the photo, her heart heavy. She didn't know if she could forgive her mother, but the sincerity in Caroline's voice tugged at something deep inside her. "Lily deserves to know her grandmother," Emma said finally. "And I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you, but I'm willing to try. For her sake." Caroline nodded, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." The waitress returned with their coffee, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They talked about Lily's favorite books, the flower shop, and the storm that had brought them to this moment. For the first time in years, Emma felt the faint stirrings of connection with her mother, though the wounds were far from healed. That afternoon, Emma returned to the shop, her emotions still raw. She was startled to find Walter waiting outside, a clipboard in hand. "Hey, Emma," he said, his easy smile putting her at ease. Walter, what's all this? She asked, gesturing to the clipboard. Just some ideas I sketched out for the shop, he replied, handing her the papers. Figured I'd get a head start, grant or no grant. Emma flipped through the pages, her breath catching at the intricate designs. Walter had reimagined Petal Haven with larger windows, better shelving, and a cozy seating area for customers. Walter, this is incredible, she said, her voice filled with awe. Glad you like it, he said, his grin widening. You got a good thing here, Emma. Let's make it even better. Emma felt a wave of gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Walter said. Just keep doing what you're doing. This town needs your flowers, your spirit. That evening, Emma tucked Lily into bed, her thoughts heavy with the day's events. As she sat by her daughter's bedside, Lily looked up at her with curious eyes. Mom, is Grandma going to visit again? Lily asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. I think so, honey. She really wants to get to know you. Good, Lily said with a sleepy smile. She seems nice. Emma kissed Lily's forehead, her heart aching with the complexity of it all. The next day, Emma's phone buzzed with a call from the community center. Her breath caught as she answered. Miss Carter? I'm calling about your grant application, the voice on the other end said. Yes, Emma said, clutching the counter for support. Congratulations, the voice continued. You've been approved for funding. Emma's knees nearly gave out as relief washed over her. Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. As she hung up, she couldn't help but laugh a real, joyous laugh that bubbled up from deep within. She turned to Lily, who had been coloring at the counter. Guess what, sweetheart? We're going to fix the shop. Lily cheered, throwing her arms around her mother. In that moment, Emma felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, she believed she could face it. That night, as Emma lay in bed, she reflected on the past few days. Her mother's unexpected reappearance, Walter's kindness, the community's support, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle coming together. She looked at the photo of her father on the nightstand and smiled. We're going to be okay, Dad, she whispered. One step at a time. And as sleep claimed her, Emma dreamed not of the storm that had nearly broken her, but of the sunrise she was beginning to see on the horizon. The sound of hammers echoed through Petal Haven as Emma stepped into the shop the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the boarded-up window, casting long beams of light onto the dusty floor. Walter stood in the middle of the room, clipboard in hand, directing a couple of volunteers who had come to help. Emma couldn't help but smile. You've got quite the crew here, Walter. He looked up, grinning. When the news got out that you got the grant, people wanted to pitch in. Your shop means a lot to this town, Emma. Emma's throat tightened. I don't know how to thank everyone. This is overwhelming. Walter waved her off with a chuckle. You just focus on keeping those flowers beautiful. Leave the heavy lifting to us. She glanced around at the group, a mix of neighbors and friends, each working with purpose. Mr. Hart from the bakery was sanding the counters while Sarah was sorting through boxes of salvaged inventory. Even teenagers from the high school were there, painting the walls with bright, cheerful colors. As the renovations progressed, Emma found herself marveling at how the shop was transforming. Walter's design was coming to life, wide-open shelving, fresh lighting, and a new corner designated for small potted plants and arrangements. It felt like more than just a repair. It felt like a rebirth. Walter, this is incredible, Emma said one afternoon as they stood together surveying the progress. Walter smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It's shaping up, isn't it? You got a good thing here, Emma. This shop has always been a little piece of happiness for the people who walk through your door. Now it'll be even better. Emma leaned against the counter, her heart full. You know, I used to think asking for help was a sign of weakness. But now I see it's just the opposite. Walter nodded thoughtfully. We all need help sometimes. And sometimes, giving help is what keeps us going. This shop, these people, it's all connected. That's what community is about. Later that week, Emma was loading a shipment of new supplies when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Need a hand? Emma turned to see Caroline standing in the doorway, her expression tentative. Mom, Emma said, surprised. What are you doing here? I heard about the renovations, Caroline replied, stepping inside. I thought maybe I could help. Emma hesitated, still unsure of how to navigate this fragile new relationship. I guess there's always something to do, she said finally, handing Caroline a pair of gloves. The two worked side by side in relative silence, unpacking boxes of vases and floral foam. Emma stole glances at her mother, noting how carefully she handled each item, her movements deliberate and precise. Emma, Caroline said after a while, her voice breaking the quiet. I know I can't make up for the time I lost with you, but I want to try. If you'll let me. Emma paused, her hands stilling on a roll of ribbon. She looked at her mother, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. I don't know how to do this, Mom, Emma admitted. I'm still angry, but I want Lily to have her grandmother. And maybe over time we can figure it out. Caroline nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. That's all I could hope for. For the first time in years, Emma felt a flicker of possibility of rebuilding not just the shop, but the relationship she thought was lost. By the end of the week, Petalhaven was nearly ready for its grand reopening. Emma stood in the middle of the shop, taking it all in. The walls were freshly painted in soft greens and yellows, the shelves stocked with vibrant flowers and pots, and the new display window allowed sunlight to flood the space. Sarah walked in, clapping her hands together. Emma, this place looks amazing. You must be so proud. Emma smiled, though she felt a twinge of nervousness. I am. But what if people don't come back? What if— Stop, Sarah interrupted, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. People love this shop, and they love you. Tomorrow's going to be perfect. Trust me. That night, Emma and Lily prepared for the reopening together. Lily carefully arranged a vase of tulips on the dining table, her small hands moving with care. Are you excited, Mom? Lily asked, her eyes shining. Emma nodded, her heart swelling with pride. I am, sweetheart, and I couldn't have done this without you. Lily beamed, and Emma kissed the top of her head. As Emma lay in bed later that night, she couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought her here. The storm, the grant, Walter's guidance, the community's support, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Looking at the framed photo of her father on the nightstand, she whispered, I hope you're proud of us, Dad. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was finally moving forward. The next morning, the air was crisp and cool as Emma and Lily walked to the shop. Balloons were tied to the lampposts, and a small crowd had already gathered outside. Walter was there, chatting with Mr. Hart, while Sarah organized trays of coffee and pastries. Emma took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Ready, Lily? Her daughter nodded enthusiastically. As Emma unlocked the door, the crowd burst into applause. The shop filled with laughter and warm greetings as neighbors poured in to see the transformation. Emma, this is beautiful, one woman said, admiring a display of orchids. You've outdone yourself, another added. Emma smiled, her cheeks flushing with gratitude. It wasn't just the shop that had been transformed, it was her perspective. As the day went on, Emma found herself reflecting on the kindness of those around her. Walter's unwavering support, Sarah's encouragement, Caroline's efforts to reconnect. It was a reminder that even in the hardest moments, she was never truly alone. That evening, after the last customer had left, Emma stood in the shop, the lights casting a warm glow over the space. Walter and Sarah had stayed to help clean up, and Caroline had taken Lily home for the night. You did it, Sarah said, leaning against the counter. We did it, Emma corrected, her voice filled with emotion. Walter chuckled. Now that's the spirit. As she locked up the shop and stepped into the cool night air, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. The journey wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Looking up at the stars, she whispered, Thank you. For the first time, it wasn't a plea. It was gratitude for the kindness of others, for the strength she'd found within herself, and for the hope that had carried her through. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity at Petalhaven. Business was booming, with new customers drawn in by the fresh look of the shop and returning regulars thrilled to see it thriving again. Every day brought new challenges managing inventory, fulfilling custom orders, and balancing the books, but for the first time in months, Emma felt energized. Yet, amid the excitement, there was a quiet, lingering tension in her heart. Her mother, Caroline had started visiting regularly. She'd been helping around the shop, spending time with Lily, and even offering advice on how to manage the growing demands of the business. On the surface, it seemed like progress. But deep down, Emma wasn't sure what to make of it. One afternoon, Emma stood behind the counter, arranging a bouquet of irises and tulips for a last-minute order. The scent of fresh blooms filled the air, mingling with the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the newly installed windows. Caroline sat nearby, patiently untangling a bundle of ribbons. "You know, your father loved tulips," she said softly, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Emma paused, her hands stilling on the flowers. "I know. He planted them every spring." Caroline smiled faintly. He used to get so excited when they started blooming, like a kid on Christmas morning. Emma didn't respond right away. She could feel the weight of unsaid words between them, a fragile bridge neither of them knew how to cross. Finally, she set the bouquet aside and turned to her mother. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Caroline looked up, guilt flickering in her eyes. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that you'd hate me, that I'd done too much damage to fix things." Emma crossed her arms, trying to keep her emotions in check. "You did hurt me, Mom. A lot. But Lily, she doesn't know that. All she sees is a grandmother who shows up with cookies and stories. And I want that for her. I just don't know how to trust you again." Caroline's hands trembled as she placed the ribbons down. "I don't expect you to trust me right away, Emma. I know I have to earn that. But I promise you, I'm here for the long haul. I'm not running again." Emma nodded, though her heart remained guarded. "I guess we'll see." That evening, as Emma walked home with Lily, her daughter skipped happily beside her, holding a small bouquet of daisies she'd picked out from the shop. "Grandma said she's coming to my soccer game tomorrow," Lily said, her eyes bright. Emma smiled, though a part of her still felt uneasy. "That's nice, sweetheart. I'm sure she'll love watching you play." Lily looked up at her, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Are you and Grandma still mad at each other?" Emma stopped, crouching down to meet Lily's gaze. "It's not that simple, honey. Grown-ups sometimes take a while to figure things out. But we're trying okay." Lily nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "I'm glad. I like having Grandma around." Emma hugged her tightly, her heart aching with the weight of her daughter's innocence. The next morning, Caroline arrived early at the shop, holding a thermos of coffee and a brown paper bag. "I brought breakfast," she said, setting the bag on the counter. Emma glanced inside, finding 2 croissants and a small container of jam. The gesture was so simple, yet it stirred something in her. "Thanks," Emma said, her voice softer than usual. As they ate in comfortable silence, Caroline reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I've been meaning to give you this," she said, sliding it across the counter. Emma hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a check made out to her, a substantial amount written in neat cursive. "What is this?" Emma asked, her brow furrowing. "It's for the shop," Caroline explained. "To help with expenses, repairs, whatever you need." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. She'd worked so hard to get Petal Haven back on its feet, leaning on her community, but always determined to stand on her own. Taking money from her mother felt like opening a door to something she wasn't sure she wanted to let in. "I can't take this, Mom," Emma said, sliding the envelope back. "Emma, please," Caroline said, her tone earnest. "I know I can't undo the past, but let me do this. Let me help you." Emma stared at the envelope, conflicted. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Okay, but this doesn't mean everything's forgiven." Caroline nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and understanding. "I know, but it's a start." That afternoon, Walter stopped by the shop to check on progress. He noticed the tension in Emma's face as she worked. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," he said, leaning against the counter. Emma sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's just my mom. She's trying, and I want to let her back in, but it's so hard. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive her." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "Forgiveness isn't something you do for someone else, Emma. It's something you do for yourself. Carrying all that anger and hurt, it's heavy. Letting it go doesn't mean forgetting. It just means making room for peace." Emma considered his words, a lump forming in her throat. How do you let go of something that's shaped you for so long? Walter smiled gently. One step at a time. That night, after closing the shop, Emma sat at her kitchen table, staring at the check her mother had given her. She thought about all the ways Caroline had tried to make amends, helping in the shop, showing up for Lily, offering her financial support. She still wasn't sure if she could fully trust her mother, but Walter's words echoed in her mind. One step at a time, Emma pulled out her phone and typed a short message. Thank you for the check. I'll put it to good use. She hit send before she could overthink it, then set the phone down with a shaky breath. The next day, Caroline showed up at Lily's soccer game as promised. She cheered loudly from the sidelines, her enthusiasm infectious. Emma watched from a distance, a small smile tugging at her lips. When the game ended, Lily ran up to them, her face flushed with excitement. Did you see my goal, Grandma? I did. It was amazing, Caroline said, hugging her tightly. Emma stood quietly, watching the scene. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her mother could be a real part of their lives. As they walked to the car, Caroline fell in a step beside her. Thank you for letting me come today, she said. Emma nodded, her heart feeling a little lighter. Thank you for showing up. That evening, as Emma closed the shop, she reflected on the day. The laughter at the soccer game, the warmth of her community, and the tentative steps she and her mother were taking toward reconciliation, it all felt like pieces of a life coming together. Looking up at the stars, Emma whispered, one step at a time. And for the first time, she believed it. The shop was buzzing. Customers filled the aisles, admiring vibrant bouquets and chatting with Emma about upcoming events. The grand reopening of Petal Haven had not only brought back loyal patrons, but also attracted new ones, eager to see what all the excitement was about. Emma moved through the space with purpose, her apron tied snugly around her waist and a pencil tucked behind her ear. She smiled and nodded, helping an elderly woman pick out daisies and discussing centerpiece options with a young couple planning a small wedding. Yet beneath her calm demeanor, Emma felt the strain of the growing demands. Orders were coming in faster than she could handle, and she barely had time to restock inventory before the shelves were emptied again. Emma, Sarah called from the back room, balancing a stack of boxes. The delivery's here, and we're already running low on vases. Should we order more? Emma turned, her mind racing. Yes, but check the budget first. I don't want to overextend. Got it, Sarah said, disappearing into the storage area. Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair. The shop's success was a blessing, but it came with its own set of challenges. Later that afternoon, Walter stopped by, as he often did, to check in. You're looking a little frazzled, he said, leaning against the counter. Emma gave him a tired smile. That obvious? Walter chuckled. Only to someone who's been in your shoes. What's going on? Emma gestured to the bustling shop. Business is booming, but I can't keep up. I need more help, but hiring someone feels like such a big step. Walter nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's a good problem to have, but you don't have to do it all alone. Sometimes, the hardest part of growth is learning to delegate. Emma sighed, her shoulders slumping. I know. It's just hard to let go of control. This shop is my baby. Walter smiled knowingly. It still will be, even if you have a little help. Think about it, okay? That evening, after the last customer had left, Emma locked up the shop and headed home. As she walked through the quiet streets, the crisp autumn air nipping at her cheeks, she couldn't shake the feeling of being stretched too thin. When she arrived, she found Lily and Caroline sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by construction paper, glue, and glitter. What's going on here? Emma asked, setting her bag down. Grandma's helping me with a school project, Lily said, holding up a glittery poster about animals. Emma smiled, a small flicker of gratitude warming her heart. It looks great, Lily. Thanks, Mom. Caroline looked up, her face soft with affection. Anything for my girls. As Emma watched them work together, she felt a pang of longing for what their relationship could have been if her mother had stayed. But instead of dwelling on the past, she reminded herself of Walter's advice. One step at a time. The next morning, Emma arrived at the shop early, determined to tackle her growing to-do list. She spent hours organizing the back room, placing new inventory orders and updating the online store. But by mid-afternoon, she felt the familiar ache of exhaustion creeping in. "Emma." Sarah's voice startled her. Emma looked up to see Sarah standing in the doorway, a concerned expression on her face. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked. "You've been running yourself ragged lately." Emma sighed, leaning against the counter. "I'm fine. Just busy." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You keep saying that, but you're going to burn out if you don't slow down. Have you thought about hiring someone?" Emma hesitated. "I have, but it feels risky. What if it doesn't work out?" Sarah crossed her arms. "And what if it does?" "You can't do everything, Emma. Let someone else carry some of the weight." Emma knew Sarah was right. She just needed the courage to take the leap. That afternoon, as Emma was packing up an order, Caroline stopped by the shop. "You look tired," Caroline said, her brow furrowing. Emma smiled faintly. "That's the theme of the week." Caroline glanced around the busy shop, then back at her daughter. "What if I helped out? Just a few hours a day, to take some of the pressure off." Emma blinked, surprised. "You want to work here?" "Why not?" Caroline said with a shrug. "I love flowers and I get to spend more time with you and Lily. It's a win-win." Emma hesitated. Letting her mother into the shop felt like opening another door she wasn't sure she was ready for. But as she looked around at the bustling store, she realized she couldn't keep up alone. "Okay," Emma said finally. "Let's give it a try." Caroline smiled, a hint of relief in her expression. "You won't regret it." Over the next week, Caroline proved to be a natural. She greeted customers with warmth, arranged displays with an eye for detail, and even offered suggestions for new products. "You know, Emma," Caroline said one afternoon as they worked side by side, "your father would be so proud of you. This shop, it's everything he dreamed of." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." Caroline hesitated, then added, "And I'm proud of you, too. I know I've missed so much, but seeing you now, I'm just grateful to be a part of it." Emma looked at her mother, her heart softening. "I'm glad you're here." That evening, after a busy day at the shop, Emma sat on the couch with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far they'd come. The shop was thriving, Lily was happy, and her relationship with her mother was slowly mending. But even as things began to fall into place, Emma knew there were still challenges ahead. Growth, she realized, wasn't just about success, it was about finding balance, learning to trust, and allowing others to help. She looked out the window at the darkening sky, a quiet determination settling over her. "We'll figure it out," she whispered, "one step at a time." And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she truly believed it. The first frost of the season had arrived overnight, leaving a delicate layer of ice glittering on the shop's windows. Emma pulled her scarf tighter against the biting cold as she unlocked the door to Petal Haven, the crisp morning air following her inside. She flipped on the lights, revealing shelves lined with vibrant poinsettias, wintergreens, and holiday arrangements. Normally, this time of year was bustling with orders for wreaths and centerpieces, but this morning the shop was eerily quiet. Emma glanced at the appointment book on the counter. Only one order scheduled for pickup. Her stomach tightened. As the season changed, so had the rhythm of the shop. The initial excitement of the grand reopening had waned, and the brisk business of autumn had slowed to a trickle. The shop's expenses stock, heating, salaries remained constant, but the revenue was no longer keeping pace. "Maybe it's just a slow week," Emma murmured, trying to convince herself. The jingling bell above the door pulled her from her thoughts. Caroline stepped in, bundled in a thick coat and carrying a thermos of hot coffee. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, placing the thermos on the counter. "Cold out there today." Emma managed a small smile. "Thanks, Mom. I needed this." Caroline studied her daughter, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" Emma hesitated, then sighed. "Sales have been slow. I'm trying not to panic, but it's hard not to think about how close we came to losing the shop before." Caroline reached across the counter, placing a comforting hand on Emma's. "You've built something special here, Emma. Slow periods happen, but we'll figure it out. Maybe we could run a promotion or host a holiday event to bring people in." Emma nodded, her mind already churning with ideas. "You're right. We just need to get creative." By mid-afternoon, Sarah arrived, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I brought lunch," she announced, setting down a bag of sandwiches. Emma chuckled. What would I do without you? Sarah waved her off. You'd survive, but you'd be hungry. As they ate in the back room, Emma shared her concerns about the shop's slow sales. What about a workshop? Sarah suggested. You could teach people how to make their own holiday wreaths or floral centerpieces. It's interactive, festive, and it might draw in new customers. Emma's eyes lit up. That's a great idea. We could advertise it on social media and offer discounts on supplies for participants. I'll help you set it up, Sarah said, her enthusiasm contagious. That evening, Emma and Lily sat together at the kitchen table, brainstorming ideas for the workshop. Can I help teach it, Mom? Lily asked, her face lighting up at the prospect. Emma smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair. Of course, sweetheart. You're my best assistant. Lily beamed, grabbing a piece of paper to sketch out a flyer. Emma watched her, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe this workshop was just what the shop needed to get through the winter slump. The following week, Petal Haven was transformed into a cozy workshop space. Tables were set up with bundles of evergreen branches, ribbons, and pine cones, and twinkle lights were strung along the walls, casting a warm glow over the shop. Emma stood at the counter, checking her phone for RSVPs. A dozen people had signed up, enough to make the effort worthwhile. Ready? Caroline asked, tying an apron around her waist. Emma nodded, though her nerves fluttered. As ready as I'll ever be. When the first guests arrived, Emma greeted them with a bright smile, showing them to their seats and explaining the supplies. As the workshop began, she felt her confidence grow. She guided the group through the steps of creating a wreath, her hands moving deftly as she demonstrated techniques. Lily flitted between tables, offering ribbons and pine cones to participants, her enthusiasm infectious. By the end of the evening, the shop was filled with laughter, conversation, and the scent of fresh evergreens. Each guest left with a handmade wreath and a small discount coupon for future purchases. You did it, Sarah said as they cleaned up afterward. Emma smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. We did it. The workshop's success sparked a wave of renewed interest in the shop. Orders for holiday arrangements began trickling in, and customers stopped by to browse the displays. Caroline proved invaluable during the busy days, helping with arrangements and managing the books. Emma found herself relying on her mother more and more, and though she was still cautious, she began to feel the stirrings of trust. One snowy afternoon, Emma was arranging a bouquet of roses when a familiar figure stepped into the shop. Walter, bundled in a heavy coat, stomped the snow off his boots and smiled. Hey, Walter, Emma said. What brings you out in this weather? I wanted to check on my favorite florist, Walter replied, handing her a small wrapped package. Emma raised an eyebrow. What's this? Open it and see, Walter said with a grin. Emma unwrapped the package to find a beautifully bound journal, its cover embossed with delicate floral patterns. I thought you might like a place to write down your thoughts, ideas, or whatever comes to mind, Walter said. Sometimes, putting things on paper helps you see the bigger picture. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Walter, this is thank you. It's perfect. Walter patted her shoulder. You're doing great, Emma. Don't forget to take a moment to appreciate how far you've come. That evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table, the journal open before her. She stared at the blank page for a moment before picking up a pen. Dear Dad, she wrote, today was a good day. The shop is slowly picking up again, and I'm starting to believe we'll be okay. Mom's been helping a lot, and I think I'm beginning to forgive her. She paused, the words flowing more easily than she expected. Sometimes I wonder if you can see us, if you'd be proud of what we've built. I like to think you'd love the shop as much as I do. As she wrote, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The worries about the shop's future were still there, but they no longer felt insurmountable. She closed the journal, her heart full of quiet gratitude. The next morning, Emma woke to find Lily standing at the window, her face pressed against the glass. Look, Mom, it snowed again, Lily exclaimed. Emma joined her, gazing out at the snow-covered streets. The world looked fresh and new, as if ready for a new beginning. Come on, Emma said, pulling Lily into a hug. Let's get ready for the day. The shop won't run itself. As they prepared to head out, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges of winter weren't over, but with her community, her family, and her own resilience, she knew she could weather the storm. And as they stepped into the crisp morning air, Emma whispered to herself, one step at a time. The storm rolled in unexpectedly. Emma stood at the window of Petal Haven, watching as gusts of wind shook the trees outside, their bare branches bending beneath the weight of an early winter squall. Snow swirled through the air, blanketing the town in a thick, relentless coat. Inside, the shop was quiet, eerily so. Foot traffic had all but disappeared with the worsening weather. The warmth of the workshop's success now seemed like a distant memory. Emma shivered and pulled her cardigan tighter around her. She glanced at the register, its drawer nearly empty. The last few days had been painfully slow, and the holiday rush she'd hoped for was nowhere in sight. Caroline appeared from the back room, holding a tray with 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. "Thought you could use this," she said, placing a mug in front of Emma. "Thanks," Emma said, taking the cup and wrapping her hands around its warmth. Caroline sat across from her, her brow furrowed with concern. "You've been quiet all day. What's on your mind?" Emma hesitated, then sighed. "It's the shop. We were doing so well, but now, the weather, the bills, it feels like we're slipping again." Caroline reached out, covering Emma's hand with her own. "You've come so far, Emma. A slow week doesn't erase all the progress you've made. And you're not in this alone." Emma met her mother's gaze, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her worry. "I know. It's just hard not to feel like every setback is the start of something worse." The next morning, the storm had eased, but the damage was done. The streets were still buried in snow, and the town was eerily still. Emma bundled up and made her way to the shop, her boots crunching through the frozen slush. When she arrived, her heart sank. The shop's front window, her beautiful, newly installed display, was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the glass. "No," Emma whispered, her breath fogging in the cold air. She rushed inside, her hands trembling as she inspected the damage. A fallen branch lay outside, partially buried in the snow, the likely culprit. Caroline arrived moments later, her face falling as she took in the scene. "Oh, Emma," she said softly. Emma bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. "I don't know how much more of this I can take, Mom. First the slow sales, now this. I feel like I'm failing." Caroline pulled her into a hug, her voice steady. "You're not failing, Emma. You've already accomplished so much. We'll fix this. Together." That afternoon, Walter stopped by after hearing about the damage. He stood with his hands on his hips, inspecting the broken window. "It's not as bad as it looks," he said finally. "A good glazier can replace it in a day." Emma frowned. "But how am I supposed to afford it? The grant money is gone, and the shop's barely breaking even right now." Walter turned to her, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You know, this sounds like the perfect opportunity for another community effort." Emma hesitated. "I can't keep asking people for help, Walter. They've already done so much." "You're not asking," Walter said firmly. "You're giving people a chance to support something they care about. Trust me, they'll want to help." The next day, Walter helped Emma draft a post for the shop's social media page. "Dear friends of Petal Haven," it read, "a fallen branch has cracked our shop's front window, and we're facing unexpected repair costs. If you've ever enjoyed a bouquet from our store or participated in one of our workshops, we'd love your support. Whether it's a donation, a purchase, or simply sharing this post, every little bit helps." Emma hit post with trembling hands, unsure of what to expect. Within hours, the response was overwhelming. Comments flooded in messages of encouragement, offers of help, and stories from customers who cherished their experiences at Petal Haven. By the next morning, donations had begun trickling in. One regular customer stopped by with a check, while another offered to cover the cost of the glass repair entirely. "You see," Caroline said, smiling as she read through the messages. "This town loves you, Emma. They want to see you succeed." With the community's support, the window was repaired by the end of the week. As Emma stood outside, watching the glaziers install the new pane, she felt a sense of gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. Walter appeared beside her, his hands in his pockets. "Told you they'd come through," he said with a grin. Emma laughed softly. You were right. I don't know what I'd do without you, Walter. Well, lucky for you, you don't have to find out, he teased. That evening, Emma and Caroline sat in the shop, sipping tea as the last of the day's light faded. You know, this whole experience has reminded me of something your father used to say, Caroline said, her voice thoughtful. Emma looked at her, curious. What's that? Caroline smiled. He used to say, every crack lets the light in. I think he meant that sometimes the hardest moments lead to the brightest ones. Emma leaned back, her heart full. I think he was right. The next morning, Emma opened the shop to find a small package waiting on the counter. There was no note, just a neatly wrapped bundle tied with twine. Inside, Emma found a beautiful handmade ornament, etched with the words Petal Haven, where beauty grows. As she held it in her hands, a sense of calm washed over her. This shop wasn't just hers. It belonged to the community, to everyone who had helped it grow. That day, Emma gathered her team Caroline, Sarah, and Walter and laid out plans for the future. We've been through a lot, she said, her voice steady. But we're still here, and we're stronger because of it. Let's make this winter one to remember. Together, they brainstormed ideas for new workshops, partnerships with local businesses, and a holiday event to draw people in. As they worked, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges they'd faced hadn't broken them. They'd made them more determined. And as she looked around at the people who had become her family, Emma realized something profound. Even in the face of setbacks, they were building something beautiful. The shop hummed with activity. Strings of twinkling fairy lights hung from the ceiling beams, casting a warm glow over the space. Evergreen garlands adorned the counters, and a tall pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments donated by customers. It was the day of Petal Haven's holiday open house, and Emma could feel the energy in the air. She smoothed the front of her sweater, nerves fluttering in her stomach as she surveyed the shop. The event had been weeks in the making, and despite the challenges leading up to it, everything was finally coming together. Sarah appeared at her side, holding a tray of cookies. The refreshments table is ready, and Walter just finished setting up the photo booth. How are you feeling? Emma smiled, though her hands fidgeted with the edge of the counter. Nervous, excited, grateful. A little of everything, I guess. You've got this, Sarah said, her voice brimming with confidence. Emma nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. As the doors opened, the shop quickly filled with customers. Families wandered through the aisles, admiring the holiday arrangements and chatting over cups of hot cider. In one corner, Lily sat at a small craft table, helping children decorate mini poinsettias with glitter and ribbons. Her laughter rang out, a bright, joyful sound that filled Emma's heart. Caroline stood behind the counter, expertly wrapping bouquets for customers. She moved with a quiet confidence, her once hesitant presence now fully integrated into the rhythm of the shop. Your mother's doing great, Walter said, appearing beside Emma. Emma followed his gaze, watching Caroline interact with a customer. Yeah, she said softly. She is. Walter glanced at her, his expression warm. And so are you. Look around, Emma. This is all you. Emma blinked back tears, her emotions threatening to spill over. Not just me, she said. It's everyone who's been here helping, believing in me. Walter smiled. Well, you gave them something to believe in. As the afternoon wore on, Emma found herself caught up in the magic of the event. She helped a young couple pick out a centerpiece for their first Christmas together, guided a grandmother and granddaughter through making floral ornaments, and shared countless smiles and conversations with customers old and new. At one point, she stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. Snow had started to fall, soft flakes drifting lazily from the sky. The town was quiet and peaceful, the lights from neighboring shops casting a festive glow. Caroline joined her, wrapping a scarf around her neck. It's beautiful, isn't it? Emma nodded. It really is. They stood in silence for a moment before Caroline spoke again, her voice hesitant. Emma, I just want to say thank you for letting me be a part of this, of your life. I know it hasn't been easy. Emma turned to her mother, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. It hasn't, she admitted. But you've shown up, Mom. and that means more than I can say." Caroline's eyes glistened with tears as she reached out to take Emma's hand. "I'm proud of you, Emma, and I hope I've started to make you proud too." Emma squeezed her mother's hand, her voice soft. "You have." The evening culminated with a tree lighting ceremony outside the shop. The crowd gathered in the snowy street, bundled in coats and scarves, their faces lit with anticipation. Emma stood beside Lily, her arm wrapped around her daughter's shoulders. Walter held the switch for the lights, and after a quick countdown, the tree burst into a cascade of warm, golden light. Cheers and applause rang out as the crowd admired the glowing tree. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat as she took in the scene. It was more than she had ever dreamed. Her shop, her family, her community all coming together in this moment of celebration. "Mom, look how pretty it is!" Lily exclaimed, her face alight with wonder. Emma smiled, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "It's perfect, sweetheart." After the crowd had dispersed and the shop was quiet once more, Emma lingered by the counter, soaking in the warmth of the evening. Walter, Sarah, and Caroline joined her, each holding a mug of hot cider. "That was amazing," Sarah said, her cheeks still pink from the cold. "You pulled it off, Emma," Walter added. "And then some." Caroline raised her mug in a toast. "To Emma and to Petalhaven. May it always be a place where beauty grows." They clinked their mugs together, the simple gesture filled with meaning. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Lily was tucked in a bed, Emma sat at her kitchen table with her journal. "Dear Dad," she wrote, "tonight was everything I hoped it would be. The shop feels alive again, and so do I. Mom was here helping, laughing, being part of it all. I think you'd be proud of her. Of us." She paused, her pen hovering over the page. "It's funny how life works, isn't it? A year ago, I thought I was losing everything. Now I feel like I've gained more than I ever imagined. Thank you for teaching me to never give up, even when things seem impossible. I miss you every day, but I feel you here with me, in every flower, every laugh, every moment of hope." Closing the journal, Emma smiled to herself. The challenges weren't over. There would always be hurdles to face, but for the first time, she felt ready. She stood, turning off the lights and heading to bed, her heart full of gratitude and peace. The next morning, the sun rose over the snow-covered town, casting a golden glow over Petalhaven. As Emma unlocked the shop, she felt a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. "Good morning, beautiful shop," she murmured with a smile. And as the bell above the door jingled, welcoming the first customer of the day, Emma whispered to herself, "One step at a time." The winter sun poured through the freshly repaired window of Petalhaven, its rays catching on the garlands and twinkling fairy lights that still adorned the shop. The warmth of the holiday event lingered in the air, and Emma could feel its glow in her chest. She placed a delicate bouquet of white lilies and soft blue hydrangeas in the center of a polished wooden table, stepping back to admire her work. A contented smile crept across her face. It was early morning, and the town was still waking up, but Emma found solace in these quiet moments before the day's rush began. Behind her, the bell above the door jingled, signaling the arrival of Caroline. "Morning, sweetheart," her mother said, setting a tray of coffee cups on the counter. "Morning, Mom," Emma replied, her voice warm. Caroline untied her scarf and shrugged off her coat, hanging it neatly by the door. "The tree outside looks beautiful with the sunlight hitting it. I swear, this shop could be in a postcard." Emma laughed softly. "It does look nice, doesn't it?" Caroline joined her by the display table, her hands tracing the edge of the wood. "You've built something really special here, Emma." Emma paused, her fingers lingering on the petals of a lily. "I didn't do it alone. I had help from the community, from Sarah and Walter, from you." Caroline tilted her head, her expression tender. "Still, you're the heart of it. Everything you've been through, everything you've overcome, it shows in every corner of this shop." Emma turned to her mother, a knot of emotions tightening in her chest. "Thank you for saying that, and for being here. I didn't think," she trailed off, searching for the right words. Caroline stepped closer, her voice gentle. "I know I wasn't there when you needed me most, Emma, but being part of your life again, watching you thrive, it's more than I could have ever hoped for." Emma nodded, her throat thick with emotion. It means a lot. I think we're finding our way. Caroline smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. I think so too. As the morning wore on, the shop began to fill with customers. A steady stream of friendly faces wandered through, their voices mingling with the soft hum of holiday music. Walter stopped by, carrying a bundle of seed catalogs under one arm. Thought you might want to start thinking about spring, he said, placing the catalogs on the counter. Emma chuckled. Spring already? I'm still trying to recover from winter. Walter grinned. Time doesn't wait, Emma, and neither do flowers. She flipped through the pages, her mind already buzzing with ideas for the upcoming season. You're right. It's never too early to plan. That afternoon, as business quieted, Sarah arrived with Lily in tow. Lily called, running up to Emma with a wide grin. Hi, sweetheart, Emma said, crouching to hug her. How was your morning? Great. Sarah let me pick out candy canes at the store, Lily said, holding up a small striped treat. Emma laughed, her heart swelling. Well, aren't you lucky? As Lily wandered off to help Caroline arrange a display, Sarah leaned against the counter. You look happy, Sarah observed. Emma tilted her head. I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel like things are steady. Sarah smirked. Steady? With a shop, a kid, and a mom you're reconnecting with? That doesn't sound steady to me. Emma laughed, shaking her head. Okay, maybe not steady, but it feels like I'm on solid ground. Like I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living. Sarah smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. You've earned it, Emma. As the day wound down, Emma sat at the counter, her journal open before her. She glanced around the shop, taking in the cozy atmosphere and the people she loved most. Dear Dad, she wrote, Today, I'm not just grateful for what we've built, I'm excited for what's ahead. This shop is more than I ever dreamed it could be, and it's not just because of me. It's because of everyone who believed in it, who believed in me. She paused, tapping her pen against the page. Mom and I are doing better. It's still a work in progress, but I think you'd be proud of her. I think you'd be proud of us. Her thoughts drifted to Lily, who was laughing with Caroline in the back room. And Lily, she's everything, Dad. She's curious and kind and full of so much light. I see you in her sometimes, in the way she looks at the world like it's full of endless possibilities. Emma closed the journal, her heart full. That evening, after the shop was locked up and Lily was asleep, Emma and Caroline sat together on the couch, sipping tea. The house was quiet, the soft glow of a table lamp casting shadows on the walls. I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately, Emma said, her voice low. Caroline looked at her, a hint of sadness in her eyes. So have I. Emma set her mug down, turning to face her mother. He'd be so happy to see us like this, to see how far we've come. Caroline reached over, taking Emma's hand. He would, and he'd be so proud of you, Emma, of the life you've built. Emma smiled, her eyes misting. I hope so. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of their shared grief lightened by the bond they were rebuilding. The next morning, the world outside was crisp and quiet. Emma stood on the shop's front step, breathing in the cold, clean air. The sky was a soft shade of blue, and the snow sparkled like diamonds under the early light. Walter arrived with a cup of coffee, handing it to her with a grin. What's the plan for today? He asked. Emma sipped her coffee, a smile spreading across her face. The same as every day. Take it one step at a time. Walter nodded, his expression warm. That's a good plan. As Emma opened the shop and stepped inside, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. Life would always have its challenges, but she had learned to weather them with resilience, with hope, and with the unwavering support of those around her. And as she arranged the day's first bouquet, she whispered to herself, this is just the beginning. Life has its twists and turns, but as Emma's story shows, every challenge is an opportunity to grow stronger and build something beautiful. If her story touched your heart and reminded you of the strength and hope, kindness, and community, we'd love to have you join us for more. Subscribe to our channel for inspiring stories about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love to transform lives. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment in Emma's journey resonated most with you?